This is the ultimate tutorial on ChatGPT, a software that lets you write anything, code anything, learn anything, and become anything. I'm Darby, a doctor and YouTuber, and ChatGPT has been an absolutely freaking insane productivity hack that I've been completely obsessed with over the last few weeks. If you're a university student or a high school student, then ChatGPT can help you write essays and summarize lecture notes. If you're like me and into content creation, then it can help you generate more ideas or write blog posts, and it can even help you code. So I'll start from scratch and teach you all this incredibly useful stuff that doesn't exist in any other video, because I basically figured it out as I went along trying to figure it out for myself. And to start, ChatGPT is available here. This is chat.openai.com. To actually start off with, this chat box here is something that you can put any text into. So for example, you can tell it to literally say, hey, I want to write a 200-word essay about quantum physics. And what will happen is that it will generate a response for you, and this is very impressive because it's a cool AI piece of software, right? So the official word of this sentence that you just wrote is called a prompt. There's a whole new job which basically never existed until recently called prompt engineering, and it's manipulating this text to be able to create things that you want, whether it's art, whether it's writing in this case. And let me show you an example of prompt engineering. So a 300-word essay on quantum physics is very impressive. Like, it's really gotten quite a lot. It's told us that quantum physics introduces the concept of quantum states, and these states are represented by wave functions. But you might realize, hey, like some of this stuff is a little bit complicated. For example, the behavior of quantum systems is governed by the Schrödinger equation, which describes how the wave function of the system changes over time. That sort of essay might be good if someone understands what that means, but I don't, because I'm not a scientist. So I'm going to show you how to change it to make it easier to understand using prompt engineering. Now, here I've written, but explain it to me as if I was a 10th grade student. And that's very important, because when you actually tell ChatGPT what to do, then it can explain things in exactly the way that you want. The output is very much defined by how you tell it to do specific things. And you can see now that's actually included analogies. Like, imagine you have a toy box and there's different types of toy balls, like basketballs, soccer balls, tennis balls. And basically, it has now changed this essay into something that people can easily understand. So the first and most useful thing about knowing what to do with ChatGPT, you can write anything that you want, but you want to try to be as specific as possible with the things that you want. And you can really get quite creative with this. So for example, write a 200-word essay about quantum physics, but explain it to me as if I was a 10th grade student, but use a lot of analogies with fruit. And so it immediately starts off by saying quantum physics is like a fruit stand at a farmer's market. It's all about the different types of fruit and how they behave. There's different types of fruits like apple, oranges, and bananas. There are also different types of particles like electrons, photons, and protons. If a professor went and started talking to you in this way, you'd probably be like, this professor is kind of a freak. ChatGPT does not have judgment for what you want it to output in general. So you can ask it to do anything, just be specific about it. Knowing how to do this prompt engineering well is something that will set you up for the future, because if you know how to do it well, you have a massive advantage over anyone that doesn't. So let's talk about how to write a good prompt. I'm going to include this entire video's prompts as a database that you can buy, so the link will be in the comments and description. But I'm going to show you everything. It's just for people that want to save time and just quickly read through the different things I'm going to suggest. So the question that you should always have in your mind is, what is the data that I want to be outputted? What do I want ChatGPT to physically write? So for example, you can even ask it to say, hey, please give me a table that shows 0 apples and 5 oranges. And it can actually print out a table. You can even ask it for something like a code block, for example. You might be like, hey, teach me Python code to create a function called clap. Every time clap is run, play a clapping sound and include this in a code block. So this is another form that ChatGPT can show you. For this table, you might want to add an extra column to it. So you can literally just say, add an extra column to the table that I provided, and then it can manipulate your table like that. You can ask ChatGPT to give you lists of things. So if I say, give me 3 ideas for YouTube videos about how to grow on Instagram, then it will actually provide you with a 1, 2, 3, etc. type of list. But you might realize this list is pretty long. Like, it's giving me a full explanation for each one of the titles on this list, which I don't want. So for example, for YouTube videos, you generally want to keep your titles under 50 characters, because otherwise they don't actually appear properly on mobile. They get shortened. So you have to be specific about the outputs and say, hey, I want to keep it under 50 characters, and don't explain it any further than the title. So then, instead of this stuff where it talks about all the content of the actual videos itself, you can just say this, And then what will happen is it will just give you the much more concise versions of the titles. Now, it's important to realize that ChatGPT sort of memorizes 4,000 tokens, or in other words, it memorizes a very significant chunk of the conversation before. The way that a generative pre-trained transformer works, a GPT, is that it's trying to complete the sentence as best it can based on the billions of words and billions of sentences that's been trained on before. So if you have stuff in terms of previous messages and you want to ask ChatGPT a new question, you shouldn't do what I've been doing, which is just chucking it all into one chat, but you should actually start a new chat from scratch so that you start out fresh, basically. If you're finding ChatGPT is acting weird, putting it into a different new chat actually changes the outcome of the words. So that's really useful. Another thing that you'll find about ChatGPT is it loves to talk a lot, like a nerdy cousin who's had too much to drink at your family's dinner party. So what you can do is you can actually silence it by telling it what you don't want so that it doesn't waste a lot of time explaining things. So for example, here I'm going to ask it to, again, teach me some Python code with the function clap and include a code block. So do not explain it outside of this code block. And now ChatGPT will just give you the code, or in the case of titles, it will just give you the titles, whatever it is. I think it's generally very useful to have a thought about a programmer's mindset to ChatGPT, because that will actually help you really refine things. In coding, there's this concept of an if-else statement. So if you haven't heard of this before, it's simply the idea that you put a condition, for example, if this, then do this thing, else if you don't encounter that scenario, then you do another thing. So when you think about that in terms of ChatGPT, you might be like, I'm going to put, if the title talks about collaboration, make that title all caps. And don't include titles about hashtags, etc. But the main thing is to use the word if. So if you do that, then here's a normal stuff, right? Like these, you notice that these two have followed the rule of just generating normal Instagram titles, but then this one's like collaborating for growth. Too excited. Sorry, collaborating for growth. So here you're giving what's called a conditional. You're asking ChatGPT to do certain things if certain criteria are met. I'll show you another version of this. So here I might ask, give me 3 ideas for YouTube videos about how to grow on Instagram, keep each title under 50 characters, blah, 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 blah. If it talks about collaboration, make the title all caps. But unless it talks about collaboration, translate the title to Japanese. So if it's collaboration, all caps, else, make it Japanese. And so if I did this, it's made a bunch in Japanese, but none of them have talked about collaboration. So I'm just going to say, make 3 more ideas, one of which is collaboration. Oh, sometimes ChatGPT does not work. And so here we've bumped into our first problem, which is that it's just not doing what we wanted to do, right? So what the solution is to doing that is you just literally start again with a new chat. So I'm going to do the same thing and then say one of the ideas should be about collaboration. Ooh, having a bit of trouble here. Sometimes you just need to change it until it feels the right thing. So I think if you, this is a bit messy in terms of the actual code itself. So I think I'm going to simplify it a little bit. I'm going to make it neater because I think that will help ChatGPT. So let's start with the original idea. Give me 3 ideas for YouTube videos about how to grow Instagram following the following criteria. One of these is about collaboration. And so here we've made it much more clear, thinking like I'm trying to teach this ChatGPT the very exact steps that it should take for each scenario. You're doing a kind of verbal coding. So here, what it's done is it's followed my instructions a bit more carefully. If the title doesn't talk about collaboration, translate the title to Japanese. And so it's actually done that for these 2 titles. I need to be more specific. I need to say that if the title doesn't talk about collaboration, translate the title to Japanese and don't include the English version of the title. And you can see that now it's done perfectly. Very generally speaking, tokens relate to the number of characters in a message or the number of words in a message. I'm not going to go into the details of how that's calculated, but I will show you what happens if you get to this situation where the message is so long that ChatGPT just sort of gives up on it. So here I've been asking it to help me code an app. What it's done is it's taken my huge amount of information there and then it's given me some code. But the code here, you'll notice when it gets to this point, I looked at the code and I was like, this is not complete. So the way to solve that problem of having incomplete stuff is just to literally tell it to continue. If you just write continue, then it will continue on, which is great. If you ever get to a point where, for example, this here says, if the recorded audio file is more than 1 minute long, the code will split the and then nothing, right? All you have to do is write continue, and then it will continue on with the rest of what it's meant to try to give you. So this is Prompt Engineering 101. If you've gotten here, you've already mastered something extraordinarily useful. This will drastically change the way that you operate and the output that you can make as a human being. This part of the video has already saved you weeks of time in terms of whichever endeavor you choose. Let's talk about using ChatGPT for answering questions about pieces of text. So ChatGPT can do a bit of hallucination. It can just make up some information. So you can't always use it to be factually correct. But what you can do is if you provide it with some base of evidence or some article, for example, then it's much more accurate at being able to interpret that and then being able to give you a proper answer to a question. So let's say that I've taken this passage from the article, Why I Think Strong General AI is Coming Soon, a complicated article by Paul B. on Less Wrong, and I'm just going to copy and paste it here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to store it briefly by saying, below in quotations is an article, please store this variable as message 1 and reply with a simple yes, I've stored it when you've stored it, or just can't store it if you're unable to, and I will ask questions about it later. I use the triple quotes here, which is something that comes from Python, and then you just put it in between, so triple quotes at the top and then triple quotes at the bottom to sort of separate the passage from the rest of the instructions. And I'm going to press enter there, and hopefully it just says I memorized it, which is perfectly exactly what it's done, right? So now that I've stored this whole article, I can ask it questions about a specific piece of information. So I'm going to say, pretend I don't know anything about how AI systems work. I don't understand concepts like RNNs and transformers, which is like what this article talks about basically. But if you explain it to me, I'll understand. Please rewrite the above article in a language I'll understand. And now here is giving me a much more digestible version of the article that I've got above. It's giving me a whole explanation of what transformers are and stuff, but really this article, if you actually read it, it talks about more than that. It's actually talking about different architectures of AI. So it hasn't actually just talked about transformers, right? So I want to know something. I want to know what is the difference between all these transformers according to what the article is saying? What's the simple explanation of that? What is the author trying to say about each type of AI model? Please give a concise list of explanations which describe the author's viewpoint on them. So now you can see with the original article that I've gotten, I've actually used ChatGPT to help me interpret the article and help me understand it in ways that I can understand. So that's why ChatGPT is such an incredible tool for learning anything, no matter how complicated it is. So for me, I study medicine, I do coding, I do YouTube, I do music composition, all of these sorts of things, right? And I think that actually learning stuff is really simple in a way. You can learn anything from anywhere as long as you understand this one thing. Complex things are just lots and lots and lots of simple things intertwined. So the reason that ChatGPT makes you learn so much faster is that you've got these concepts that you may not have any idea about before. And then you think, how does the stuff that I do know, how can ChatGPT turn this abstract, complex knowledge that I have no idea about and turn it into knowledge that I'm able to understand? Usually intelligence is just people's ability to bridge that gap between what they already know and what they don't know and somehow connect those two together. But ChatGPT makes it so much easier to do that. It's like you're translating another language into a language that you can understand. There is one really tricky problem with common usage of ChatGPT, and that's the problem of memory. And this part of the video is going to teach you how to solve that problem. So really the underlying technology behind GPT is a generative pre-trained transformer. Basically, the simple way to understand this is you've got this AI that's just doing its best. It's going its gosh darn best to try to predict the next word in a sentence. And for every word that it generates, the new slightly bigger sentence is being fed into the machine to try to figure out what's the next part of the sentence. The body language is weird. Let me show you what happens if you try to post a super long article into ChatGPT. If I try to go into ChatGPT and paste this whole thing, right, it will just say, the message you submitted was too long. Please reload the conversation, submit something shorter. But I don't want to not include parts of the articles. How do you solve that? Back when I was a kid, right now the PlayStation 5 exists. We had PlayStation 1s, and PlayStation 1s had to have these things called memory cards. A memory card was only 128 kilobytes of memory. So if you have a USB stick with 1 gigabyte, that's the equivalent of 7,812.5 of these memory cards. So I thought maybe we can create the equivalent of memory cards in ChatGPT. Because ChatGPT won't process super duper long messages, as you can see, but it will process a lot of shorter ones. So the way you do it is I've created this prompt here, which is memorize this as message 1 and reply with a yes once memorized. Then I might copy just part of this article, so it's not too long, like maybe like 2 paragraphs worth, right? And then just copy paste it into there. So now it's gone and memorized it. And you can do this for message number 2, message number 3, etc. So this is awesome because now we can get around this idea of having finite memory a little bit. So now we're going to make sure we memorize this as message 2 instead and reply with yes once memorized and say yes. And then it will use message 1 and then message 2. Now, if you want to streamline this, I just give you the instruction. I'm about to copy and paste several different messages. The message after this will be message 1, the message after that will be message 2. For every new message is stored as message X, where X is replaced by the number and which increases by 1 each time. So please memorize each message I send you and reply with a yes once memorized. When I use the phrase, good to go, then I will no longer send you messages to memorize, and instead I would like you to answer the questions about the messages that you've got. If this is okay, simply reply, got it, without further explanation. But it's messed up here a little bit because it actually has summarized the message. So we are going to do this again. I'm going to put it into quotation marks like this and see if that helps. Yes, okay, so now it's memorized it, right? And here, I'm going to similarly put it into quotation marks and then it should just say yes, basically. Yeah, and if you keep on doing that, then you find it keeps on saying yes. In my experience, what can happen is that the more you put in, there is a point at which these memory cards will stop taking memory and it will just try to start summarizing stuff because, I don't know, it gets impatient or just can't remember stuff, right? So to solve that issue, you just say summarize each message so far. So now that it's giving you a summary of the messages, you can say memorize the above as summary 1. So the memory cards are useful for being able to query them and put in heaps and heaps of text, but eventually you'll get to a point where the data is like too big, too much for ChatGPT to handle, so you actually use the summaries and then you can actually query the summaries themselves as the thing that you want to ask questions of. This method is by no means perfect, but if you didn't have this concept of memory cards, then you would have no way to handle like gigantic pieces of information in the way that you can if you do have it. From the summary, help me write a brief summary of this article that's less than 100 words and would be understandable by a 6th grader. And so now it's got something like this article talks about how the field of machine learning is still young and still a lot to learn. It also mentions that the success of a certain type of model called transformers may be due to luck rather than them being the best. The author also thinks that looking at how humans work may not give us a lot of answers about how to make smart machines. One quick note is that if you're a software engineer / programmer using GPT, there's a formal way to do this sort of thing called LangChain, but I'm not going to get into that here. For the next part of the video, I want to talk about how to get specific outputs by actually training ChatGPT to give you the right output. So, if you had a child, a real-life human child, the way that you might teach them to do stuff is by showing them examples of how to do that particular thing. You might teach a child to say something like, I ate 10 apples, or I ate 10 bananas. Repeat after me. I myself do not have children, as you can probably tell, so I'm going to show you the equivalent of how to do that with AI. Now, here I've got this. I'm going to ask ChatGPT to make an ad that advertises products in different ways. But because I wanted to give me a certain type of response, I'm going to give you some examples first by including it in the triple quotes and then saying product, strong apples, advertisement, a strong apple day keeps every doctor away. The apple industry is churning out these doctor slaying machines. You will never see me at the local fruit market because of that. Or you might have a product, shiny shoes. Wearing shiny shoes means you never lose. This is not AI written, this is something I wrote. So you might want to say, hey, these are the examples. Do this for the following products. Do it for beef jerky, do it for a town made of glass, a town center made of glass, and do it for a manga comic involving ninjas. And so by having trained it, it sort of gives a rough idea of the kind of outputs that you want, right? So it's come up with some great slogans. Like, for example, beef up your snack game with our beef jerky. It's so good, it'll make you want to beef up your whole life. Or this one, come see the future of shopping in our all-glass town center. It's so clear, you'll be able to see right through your wallet. To illustrate this point more clearly, what I'm doing is I've said, here are examples for the town, capital town, and then I've included product, bananas, advertisement, na. For the next product, banana phone, advertisement, na phone, but obviously na's in capitals, right? So using the above examples, create advertisements that would suit the following products and be used in capital town. And hopefully from these examples, for the banana rope, the Apple Pod, and the Amazon Alexa, it will take the hint of what I'm trying to execute with this and create it. Unfortunately, it hasn't, so I'm just going to say, try again, not mentioning capital town in the advertisement, and very closely matching the examples I gave you. So now, here it's saying banana rope for the climb of your life, nana pod, the ultimate tech prize, and nana Alexa, smartening up your life. So it's gone a bit better. You got to try and train ChatGPT and coax it into giving you something closer to the response that you want. So here, instead of nana, adopt the appropriate corresponding equivalent to the advertisement based on the product. And then here, it's sort of done a little bit better. Banana rope, Apple Pod, Alexa Pod. And it's going a bit better. Just keep on giving instructions and hopefully you'll get to the right output that you like. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the dangers of ChatGPT and how to fix them. And the first one that is immediately popping up in all the teachers' minds is, oh my God, my students are now going to cheat at school by using ChatGPT. But if you're a student, the problem of doing this is in the short term, you'll be able to pump out essays very quickly. In the long term, you'll probably lose the ability to express exactly what you want to say. You might actually get worse at expressing things that are more authentic to yourself because you haven't worked out the tools of how to express them. I'm all about doing less work where work is unnecessary, but I feel like if you combine your ability to think yourself as well as the ability for the computers to think and mesh them together, you're going to be able to create much more as an individual. You'll become smarter and you'll be able to better utilize computers to your advantage. It's like if you had a music artist that just remixed music from other artists, then their ability to create music will be limited. But if you're someone that understands individual notes and how chords work and how melodies are made, then you'll be able to create much nicer music that's more true to you and more original. Another danger of ChatGPT is hallucinations. The thing about ChatGPT and all sorts of AI is that it has the ability to make responses that seem very real. But in fact, some of those responses are made up. In the community of people who do AI stuff, this is often referred to as hallucinating. If ChatGPT says that something is a certain way, you should always, where it's important, try to verify whether that's actually true or not. You just have to be careful that there might be stuff that looks like facts in there which actually aren't facts. I myself, I'm using ChatGPT to write a lot about health information, which will come in the form of blog posts and other things, but I'm gonna have to make sure to actually verify every single one of those articles myself to make sure it's saying the right thing, since patients, which means people's families, will be the people that are actually using this stuff. The way that you get around something being factual or not factual is you actually use the memory card idea that I talked about before. And then you take a piece of information that you know is factual and use the AI to craft stuff out of that information. If you want to cook a really delicious dish, then having really good raw ingredients helps make that dish better. It's the same for AI and ChatGPT. The next problem I want to talk about is leakage. Because ChatGPT relies on all the text that came before it, sometimes the previous text can leak into the answers or whatever you're wanting. So for example, you remember I gave the example of trying to make advertisements. But the first time I did it, the advertisement that came up for beef jerky was beef jerky. Get a taste of adventure with every bite of our beef jerky. It's so tough, even a ninja couldn't handle it. Now, I had not asked it about ninjas. In fact, I did not want ninjas to be part of my beef jerky advertisement. It's because in the third part of that, I asked it to give me a manga comic involving ninjas. So you have to realize that ChatGPT's answers are going to leak into each other. And the way that you solve that is you literally just create new chats so you don't have that leakage of information, or you just create new messages, and that can help sometimes too. The last danger of ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT at the moment, it's only been like a month or two since it's been out. By the time you watch this video, it's probably going to be, it may even be like a few years down the road that you see this video. People have already become a bit attuned to what ChatGPT sounds like. It phrases things in certain ways and it will give responses in certain formats. So the way around this is that you actually give it a kind of personality. So here is an article I wrote about clam chowder with ChatGPT. And I've asked it to create a blog post article that talks about how to make it, a brief story about a man whose marriage was saved by clam chowder, and a recipe to make the dish, which is brief and factual. I've asked it to use a friendly and casual tone, but also include interesting facts about how financial markets relate to clam chowder. It's a bit of a fever dream of article generation, but I decided to do that for fun. It will just say stuff like, have you ever thought about the financial markets and their relation to this delicious dish? And then it talked about the story of how clam chowder has the power to bring people together and even save a marriage. For example, John and Sarah, who one surprised the other with clam chowder and they were happy. And yeah, anyway, so ChatGPT has kind of its own personality, but what you can do with personality and expressiveness in writing is you can understand that writing has certain rhythms, it has certain articulations, right? So if you alter those articulations, then you can alter its personality and the way that it phrases stuff. So here, I've said, condense this whole thing into a single paragraph. Talk with extra enthusiasm, extra humor, but occasionally include sentences that are only one word long for emphasis. So here it says, clam chowder, the ultimate comfort food. It warms the soul, brings people together, and can even save marriages, just ask John and Sarah. Plus, did you know the price of clams was used as a benchmark for inflation in the late 1800s? That's actually very interesting. But let's focus on the recipe. You'll need blah, saute, and blah blah. Perfection in a bowl. Try it and you'll see it's chow-delicious. So if you wanted to basically not sound like a robot or not sound like ChatGPT, the open AI assistant that everyone uses and everyone gets to talk in the same generic way, basically make it more flashy, give it more style, and you'll get more interesting written responses. ChatGPT, when it's giving responses, it generally tries to give those responses in a way that makes sense to the majority of people, right? But you may not be the majority of people. You might be a very special person. You can actually tell ChatGPT to be a kind of actor. For me as a doctor, I don't need to understand what a thyroid is because I know that the thyroid is like part of the thyroid gland, which is a butterfly-shaped gland in the neck. It doesn't need to explain that to me. So instead, I'm going to send ChatGPT a message that says, hey, I am a doctor. Explain to me the consequences of hypothyroidism and just keep your response list to 200 words, right? So then ChatGPT will realize I don't need to re-explain the idea of a thyroid gland because, well, this guy's a doctor, he should know what it is. But even then, you can still go even deeper and you might be more detailed on your actual role. So you can say, explain this to me in technical terms, the management of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is a type of thyroid condition. You might include some of the specialized stuff like medications, investigations, and say that assume I'm an endocrinologist, which is the specialist in hormones. And then I've even specifically said concepts that I would already know do not need to be explained in further detail, and then keep this under 200 words again. And so here it's starting to use much more technical language, right? It's saying that it involves replacement therapy with levothyroxine. The initial starting dose is this micrograms per kilogram per day, which is something that doctors will understand. And then you want to keep a TSH of between 0.4 to 4.0 milli international units per liter, right? All this stuff, which may make absolutely no sense to people that aren't doctors, it's assumed that you know about it, and therefore it's talking on your level. Medicine is the example that I use, but you can use it for literally anything. For example, you are a firefighter. Now, you are an expert at putting out fires, but also in preventing harm to citizens affected by fires. Please give 2 paragraphs to explain what firefighters should do if a house caught fire, and explaining technical terms, assuming that the audience hearing your message are also firefighters. Then it started to use some technical terms, like, for example, area of origin, which is a bit self-explanatory, thermal imaging cameras, something like command personnel, I don't know what that is, incident action plan, fire suppression tactics, or ventilation-controlled fire attack, master stream operations. So all this stuff I don't really understand because I'm not a firefighter. By giving ChatGPT an acting role, it knows exactly what to do. I've given the example for 2 professional settings, but you could use it for whatever setting you want. So for example, let's say that you're thinking about another person's business and you're thinking, what are all the things that they could do as their business, or what are the different strategies that they could take as a business? And then you can be like, hey, you're this business, you run this product, you do this, blah, blah, blah. What would you do in this situation? And ChatGPT will give you a long list of things that person in that role could do. So as you can see, ChatGPT, very good actor, but I'm going to give it the role now to help me with content creation. So this section will be the most useful section of the video for YouTubers and content creators who want to use ChatGPT to generate ideas, generate content, and just basically streamline things a lot. I'm actually creating a whole bunch of AI tools for content creators using the software behind ChatGPT. So you can sign up for early access to those tools at one of the links I'll put below. And those tools will be more superior because I'm going to imbue it with YouTube knowledge. But for the sake of something that you can use today, let me start by showing you how you can use ChatGPT to create some YouTube ideas. So here I borrowed 3 different titles from Mr. Beast. I've said below is a list of ideas, please generate a list of 10 more. And so the ideas I've included are just his 3 latest videos, right? When I input this sort of example training data, then it can give me more examples that are kind of similar to those. Like here in the training data, I survived 50 hours in Antarctica, hydraulic press versus Lamborghini, or 100 kids versus 100 adults for $500,000, right? And so it's given me a whole bunch more ideas of living in a tiny house for a year, surviving in the wilderness for 30 days, surviving on a desert island for 60 days. And so So basically, if you take the different ideas from wherever you get information from, maybe it's from other YouTubers, or maybe it's inspired by books or whatever, then you can use those as examples to help ChatGPT generate more ideas for you. Ethically, I think this is fine to do because really any single form of creativity is just combining 2 things that existed before and making them into a new thing. So this is kind of just like the automated version of doing that. For YouTube, there's a lot of value in an idea. So something deeper that you can do as a content creator is be like, okay, for these ideas, what's actually the underlying thing that's creating the idea? And so you might ask it something like, hey, what are commonalities between the YouTube videos I'm listing? Can you generate a list of 10 YouTube videos that are very similar to the first 3 in my first message and explain to me why might they be so appealing? So here it's like giant Lego tower challenge. This video could feature a team of builders competing to see who can build the tallest Lego tower in a certain amount of time. And basically it's gotten a bit stuck because now it's just saying giant games. And the reason that it's gotten stuck here is the examples that it's been using are unfortunately now feeding into each other. And it's like, okay, this example is all the kind of same idea. So basically, ChatGPT has just gone like, oh, okay, I've got this example of Pong, and then Mario Kart, and then Lego Tower, and this giant game thing. I think I'll create another giant game because that seems like the right thing to do for the next part. So this is the whole concept of the AI feeding itself, basically. And so it can get stuck into this, and the way to get unstuck is to basically tell it to get unstuck. But at the end of this paragraph, it said these videos can be appealing because they're visually interesting, they are experiments or challenges, and they're often set in a competition format, which is a kind of nice thing to think about, right? So it's like, okay, these are 3 ingredients. That is a very powerful thing to determine because it's like, okay, here are the ingredients that make this YouTube or this content so powerful. Now that I know the ingredients, I can try to think with my own brain instead of ChatGPT, how can I make something that emphasizes any of these things and then turns it up to the maximum, right? What parameters can I tweak to figure out what are the individual components of visual interestingness, whatever this is, right? And then here we'll give you some options, we'll talk about contrast, talking about color, talking about movement. For example, the scale, if you just try to emphasize that you've got this gigantic Lego tower, let's say that you had a Lego tower that built its way up to space, right? It's quite impossible, but that would probably be a banger of a YouTube video. So far I've talked about YouTube idea generation, but if you want to do something like a blog post, for example, you can just literally say something like, hey, create a blog post that talks about these 3 things, and you include the different facts that you want inside of your description, as well as the tone that you might think about too. And you'll still have to do a bit of editing. So for example, no blog writer in the history of blog writers will write, welcome to our blog. That's the equivalent of writing, sincerely Mavis XOXO on a Facebook comment. Oops. So you can see, powerful tool for content creation. There is one big caveat. There's one particular caveat that no other video will talk about, but I want to tell you about it so that you can future-proof your content. Now, ChatGPT and other forms of AI, for that matter, are likely to eventually have what's called a cryptographic watermark. Essentially, we now live in an era of time where content creation is going to become absurdly easy. But the thing about AI-generated content is that no one wants to read AI-generated content. They want to read stuff from actual humans. Now, this is a prediction, but I do believe quite strongly that this will happen, is that companies that allow for content creations, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitter, whatever, they're probably going to figure out which of the stuff is AI generated, and then they might put something in to demote AI generated content to try to make sure that real creators, instead of whoever's using AI to make stuff, the real creators are the ones that actually rise in terms of their content rather than the AI, ideally. There are going to be ways around that, but I'm not going to use this video to talk about it. So just giving you a heads up that if you're thinking of now pivoting to a gigantic AI-centric strategy, just be a bit careful. Be a bit more strategic in the originality thing. AI is so new that this has not happened yet, and if it does happen, you'll probably only realize it once your content doesn't quite perform as well as other people's content. You're like, what? My content is great. Like, it's written by ChatGPT and stuff. Well, cryptographic watermarks might get you, man. This section I'm really passionate about because I'm a certain type of monkey, which you would call a code monkey. Now, ChatGPT is immediately useful for code. Let's code a basic website from scratch with it. If I just literally ask it, hey, what files do you need for a website that shows a picture of a dog? Give me examples of the file names as well as example code. So then it will ask you to create a website and it will teach you how to do it, which is amazing. AI is a great tutor. And then it will give you these different things, and I'm gonna actually show you like how well does this website actually work. So it's telling me that I need a HTML file. Let's create a folder called website. You can do this on Windows or Mac or whatever. Let's create a folder called website. Let's go and use Visual Studio Code, which is like a kind of coding software, to open that folder in the desktop. Here we've got code, and actually, despite the fact you can't really see it, then this folder is open, right? And so it's saying that I need to create a HTML file called index.html, so I'll do that. And then I'm going to copy and paste this code directly into here. I'm going to create files that are just literally based off everything that the AI is saying. And I'm being a very bad code monkey because I'm literally just copy and pasting it. And then it needs an image file which contains an actual picture of a dog. So maybe I'll just get that from, I know, Unsplash. Gimme dog. This is a cute little dog. All right, let's use this. The dog's name is Charles Deluvio. No, just kidding, that's the artist's name. But we'll put that into there, and we're just going to name it whatever AI has told us to name it. So if I open this with Safari, which is like the same as Internet Explorer, well, sadly, it hasn't all worked. Okay, you might be like, hey, I've put these files into a folder called website, but the web page does not load the picture. How can I fix this? And so here it's saying like, hey, you should make sure that the source attribute of the image tag is pointing to the correct location of the image file. I still think it's useful to know code because then you can understand what's actually going on when errors occur. But here I've just made sure that the path is there so that it is taking DocGPT, but it's taking it from the particular folder that it's in. And so if I try to reload it again, will it work? That's a good question. Here it is. Yes, it has worked, in fact. It's created a very big version of his dog. Oh my gosh, this is a poorly styled dog. But regardless, this website has actually worked now, which is good. I mean, look at this. This website is working perfectly. But like, that's a really simple website, right? I think it might be more interesting to ask something slightly more complex. Like, how do I draw an animated circle in a website? And then I still ask it to give me some code I can use. Now, I should explain that ChatGPT is very good at certain types of code. It's super duper good at Python because that's what a lot of the training is from. It's also proficient in a bunch of different languages as well. It can do Swift apps, for example, for iOS. And so if you're wondering, can ChatGPT work for my particular code? Yeah, it probably can. Keep in mind that technically speaking, the ChatGPT data can only access up to 2021. So beyond that, if there's any new like programming frameworks or changes, it's not supposed to know that they exist. Secret, it actually does to some degree, but it's not supposed to. And so here I'm going to test out this thing to create an animated circle on a website, use CSS and JavaScript. So let me just literally take that website that I had before, and instead of dog, I'm going to replace the body of the HTML with this. And then I'm going to include this circle here. And I'm going to sort of alter it a little bit so that it's using that here and putting this here, just literally copy and pasting. I've never done this before, by the way. Okay, and now let's see if this copy pasted code actually works. We're no longer displaying a dog. Our circle is nowhere to be seen. So can you give me the full code for each of the files that would be needed for the above example? And so here what it's done is it's actually just created the code and put it all into the HTML document, which is, I suppose, one way to do it. So now that we've got this new code, let's see if it works. And voila, you've got your animated circle there, generated completely from ChatGPT. I'm going to make it bigger just to emphasize the glory of our creation. So cool. This is all well and good, but you might be developing software and thinking, well, I guess I already know how to make stuff. What I want is help making my coding more efficient. So one really helpful thing that you can do is you can actually use ChatGPT to debug your code for you and fix your code for you. I'm going to give you a basic example right here. So here, I'm just going to say that I've got this document instead, and this is my dog website, and we're going to even use the correct dog.jpg, right? And it's got a bunch of mistakes, as you can probably easily see if you're a programmer. Just basically a bunch of stuff that's misspelled, right? I might just chuck in some extra like tags and stuff here just to make it more weird. Now, if I try to refresh this, you can see it just does not work properly. It's just wrong. So what ChatGPT can do is it can help you debug by basically, you can just say something like, help me debug this code and provide the fixed code in a separate code block. And so what I've done is I've literally just copy and pasted this code into these quotes here like this, and then you do that, and then you just press enter. Right, and then it'll say like, here are a few issues of the code, and then it'll tell me about all the things I've deliberately misspelled. Like instead of head, I've spelled it as hef. Instead of h1 tag, I've spelled it as h121. You can see that now it's fixed, right? And so I'm going to save that again, and lo and behold, if I refresh this, then it's fixed, and we've got our favorite boy back somewhere. Oh, here he is. Oh my gosh. It's actually funny because when you look at it this close, you can see the camera equipment reflection in the dog's eyes. That's so interesting. So sorry, Charles, for looking into your house by accident. You have nice camera equipment, so respect. ChatGPT can be used for e-commerce. So in about 2018, I actually had an e-commerce store that I ran on the side. I was being a doctor as well. So to make the store, I put on the platform Shopify. I used to spend quite a few hours like writing descriptions for individual products or individual pages of like 30-day return guarantees, return policy, all of that sort of stuff, right? Today, I'm going to teach you some neat stuff, not only just using ChatGPT to help you with e-commerce, but also just to teach you some of the e-commerce stuff along the way that might be helpful for helping improve your conversion rates on a website, which is the percentage of people that buy your product. So on a product page, you might use something like, hey, I'm running a product page for products. Let's say like Apple Watch Silicon Band, because that was something we sold a lot of. So you might be like, so you say the product does the following, put in these quotation marks and be like, made of silicon, and just is comfortable. Works with 38mm bands, let's say. And then I've just asked it to write a product page description that includes some of the following things, like what it's made for and specifically describing it. Now, oops. So here I've asked ChatGPT to write a product page for a silicone Apple Watch band, and it does the following: it's comfortable to wear, sweat resistant, can be fitted to an Apple Watch. And then I've asked it to describe what the product is, describe the materials it's made of, and describe what it's useful for. And so it will write a very short description. Now, something that's really important for e-commerce in particular is people don't really care too much about the description. They will read a little bit of it, but from the analytics that I did on my customers, you don't have to worry about this like excessively huge amounts. It's much more important to get the photography and stuff right. Just include a brief description. Even this is probably actually a little bit too long, but you can use this AI to like write a nice sounding one. I've included a whole bunch of templates in the prompt templates below, so you can have a look at that. So for example, writing 30-day guarantees and even talking about email marketing. And so we used to make a lot of money from email marketing, but I'll include that in the template. Now, email for e-commerce people is an amazing tool to get more money from the customers which have already come to your store. It's one of the best things because literally you spend $1 and then you'll get like $3 or $4 back for every dollar that you spend, if not something like $10 to $11 back. So you spend $1, you put $1 into a machine and get $11 back. That's like an amazing machine, right? So you got to make sure to do your email marketing properly, but you may not want to write your emails exactly. Here I've got an email template. It says, I have an e-commerce store website, generate email templates for it. I'll send you different requirements, and it has this personality in mind. Cool, creative, high-tech, very kind. The beginning of an email always starts with dear first name, and I've used these curly brackets because often like Klaviyo, for example, the plugin uses that, but you can put whatever your token is there. The emails will always end with this particular phrase, sincerely, Dab Apple. Don't call your website that, please. Doctors and apples do not go together. And yeah, essentially this is creating an email. Then I'll ask it to write a welcome email. And so please write an email that is sent to the customer that has just purchased product name product using the personality defined in my first message. And then it's got the start correct. It's got the end correct. It's a bit weird in the middle there because it's like, oh, the product is high-tech, cool and creative features of your new purchase. So you do have to tweak it a little bit. And I've said, hey, the product itself doesn't have that personality. Like, we as the company have it. So then it's like, we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And that's like a bit better. Similarly, you can ask it to, you probably want to ask it to do an abandoned cart email, because that customer who has abandoned their cart is a very, very high value customer, because you know that they actually went to the add to cart button, they clicked on that button. So make sure to capture them back. Klaviyo can do this. It has a function for it, and you can get it to do that. I think actually Klaviyo has a template already, but if you wanted to do a custom one, yeah, you can just say, please write an email that's sent to the customer that has added their product to cart but not purchased it, and should encourage them to complete their purchase but not in a pushy way. Similarly, if a customer wants to return their item, you can do like a theme there and say, this is what I want in terms of the template there. You should be hiring virtual assistants at some point in time to do your work for you so you can focus on bigger things. But you just use this template, and then your virtual assistant can just change the template a little bit to be able to do that. I'm going to quickly talk about ChatGPT for digital marketers, and this is also for people that have done e-commerce. Now, when I made my Apple Watch Band store in 2018, we were using Facebook ads, and we were rotating lots and lots and lots of different types of ad copy to try to figure out, okay, like, do these Facebook ads cause a response? Do they actually result in sales, right? And so often you just want to test out a lot of ads. Now, honestly, UGC, user-generated content, is the best for these ads. So if your customers have written testimonials, try to use their direct testimonials if you can, because they are the customers that love your product and they know exactly what they want from your product, right? So back in the day, I once actually wrote a Facebook ads guide, believe it or not, talking about the different advertisements that I use. And we used to, ROAS 3.30 means that for every $1 you give to Facebook marketing or whatever marketing, then you get $3.30 back. So really, we just use customer testimonials. And then someone was like, what a pleasant surprise, having purchased 2 bands from another company and being disappointed in the quality, I can't speak highly enough of these. These are definitely a high quality item when I compare the original side by side, thank you. That's a very honest and very genuine review. So we decided to use that as part of the ad, and that was something that was very convincing for customers. But you might not have that e-commerce like setup so far. You might not have those testimonials yet. So here's a template that I've included in the database in the comments below. And here you can define your product. My product is Apple Watch Silicon Band. My customer is blah. And please write 20 ads of less than 100 characters that do the following. For example, you can put in a box of selected groceries that are healthy and come with a recipe. My customer is a busy professional working in San Fran, which are often time poor and do not want to spend much time cooking. I think if you know the customer well or know your target customer, it's worthwhile elaborating on this. And then is just got the final instruction of please write 10 ads of less than 100 characters that will appeal to them. So yeah, you can just try out, you get a list here and you can put it in a table if you want. I haven't done that, but you could totally say, hey, put this in a table, so you can just copy and paste it and go from there. Sometimes like some of these aren't very good. For example, convenient and healthy meal options for tech industry professionals as an ad. It's actually a very weak ad because it doesn't tell the viewer, it doesn't tell the audience to actually do anything. So you need to maybe use a more direct call to action. So yeah, if you're testing like 100 variations of ads, probably some of the ads you realize because it has good CTR or it has like a good purchase rate or whatever, they'll work out better, which is great. It doesn't have to be Facebook ads. It can be any type of paid advertising that allows you to check the metrics and compare them and kill ads that aren't doing well and put more money into ads that are doing well. So ChatGPT can directly make you money. If you yourself are not an entrepreneur or you don't have an e-commerce store, you can help other people that have e-commerce stores do their marketing and have more in terms of ads and stuff. So that's a very quick and easy way to make some money, basically. Because this is something that they would have to write themselves and spend heaps of time writing. So instead of spending a few hours, you can just spend a few minutes prompting your ChatGPT to do the right thing and helping out your company of choice. I love ChatGPT, but ChatGPT freaking sucks at maths. So if you ask it, what's the differential of 5x to the power of 6, right? It gives you the right answer. It says the derivative of 5x to the power of 6 is 30x to the power of 5. That's correct. I've asked ChatGPT in one sentence how good at you at maths. It says, I'm very good at solving mathematical problems. But we are about to knock down this sense of arrogance that this software has. So what's the square root of 2,420,520? And it says it's approximately 1544. And I asked it, are you sure? And then it's like, no, I think it's actually a 1540. And then I've asked it to show its workings, to prove its worth. But now it tells me I can't do mathematical calculations, right? So don't use ChatGPT for maths. If you look at the actual answer for this particular thing, I've done it in a calculator here, and it's 1555.8, which is a far cry from the 1544 or 1540 that it was saying before. But there is a way to get around this issue of it not doing maths. If you really must make it do some maths, what you do is you get it to actually make the code for the maths. And so, for example, in Python, which is a coding language, you ask it, hey, can you calculate the square root of this number? Print out the answer. Printing in coding language means to just display the answer, basically. And so then it teaches you the right way to do it, and it will give you the right code. If I put in this code works in Python. When you run it, the answer becomes the correct answer, which is 1555.8020, blah, blah, blah. And that's correct, right? But if you look at what it's said in the message, it tells you it's 1540 for some reason. So you might be asking, why does ChatGPT suck so much at maths? ChatGPT knows how to complete sentences. Reasoning is not the forte of ChatGPT. Mathematics is definitely not the forte of ChatGPT. So you really need to think for a moment, if I'm asking ChatGPT to help me solve some sort of worldly complicated problem, is reason and mathematics involved in that? Because it might hallucinate an answer that's not correct and be pretty confident in its answer. So take what ChatGPT says when it comes to mathematics with a grain of salt. This part of the video is about how to use ChatGPT as a doctor. Now, I think that ChatGPT can be very, very useful for reducing the amount of paperwork that you have to write as a doctor, and I want to teach you how to do it. Now, obviously you can't paste patient confidential information into ChatGPT yet, because of the fact that OpenAI I don't think is HIPAA compliant unless you use the Microsoft version of Azure OpenAI, but that's outside of the scope of this video. So what you can do is, I know in America you guys have a thing called a letter of medical necessity, which is an annoying letter that you have to write to insurance companies to basically pay for the patients that they're supposed to be insuring. But it's a hassle. You can say, hey, I'm a doctor, write a letter of medical necessity to the medical insurance company about my patient who needs something generic, who needs insulin for the diabetes, right? And maybe somewhere in there, if you're doing a few of these, you've included my name and address, blah, 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 as these, and then you can be like, dear insurance company name. This is the ChatGPT response. It says, I'm writing to request coverage for my patient, blah, for the continued use of insulin therapy for the treatment of diabetes. And then it's saying that there's a real scenario actually where a patient will not get good glucose control with oral medications alone, and that's why insulin is so important for them. I strongly recommend that they continue it. Sincerely, blah, blah, blah. I'm fully qualified as a general practitioner, which is the same as what you guys call a family doctor in the US, or just still a general practitioner in UK and other places. So another thing that can be useful is if you used ChatGPT to explain something to a patient. Maybe you just want to give a brief explanation of some complex medical condition that they have, and then write that into ChatGPT and then print off that explanation for the patient. So like maybe your patient wants a list of what their medications do. What you might be able to do is you just copy and paste the list of medications and you put into ChatGPT and just say, write a brief explanation of how these medications work and why they applied to this patient's, neuropathic pain or whatever. And then ChatGPT will be able to generate that for you very quickly, and you just copy and paste that into like your medical software, Word document, and print that out. Your patient will be extraordinarily happy. You will have saved 20 minutes of time explaining every single medication to the patient, and then you don't have to get a repetitive strain injury from typing something like paracetamol is good for pain and whatever. On a side note, I'm going to be making some AI software for doctors specifically. I don't know when I'm going to do that, but you can go to another link below that I'll include if you are interested in hearing about that. Yeah, we made it! Now, if you for some reason have watched the entire video, you probably know more than 99% of people in the world about how ChatGPT works. You can download a database of everything that I've talked about in this particular video, including all the prompts that I've used from the link in the description below. This video has taken 2.5 hours of continuous recording to record, so I hope it's useful to someone. If it gets like 200 views, whatever, man. I'm glad that it's been out there. If you wanted, I'm going to write more about productivity and tools and stuff, so you can sign up to my newsletter in the link below. Thank you for joining me, and if you're interested, you can watch this next video about something to do with productivity, but I am going to have a bit of a rest, and I hope you have a bit of a rest too, because yeah, getting to this point, you probably did a very good job. So well done. This has been Dr. David Liu, Darby, and you take care. Bye-bye.